Welcome everybody to another episode of Holy Smokes, Cigars and Spirituality. I am Christian Smith, the heretic, your host. We're glad to be here for another week. Got some of my peoples with me. I want to say a few things real quick. First of all, happy birthday, Grayson Hester, the pundit, who's with us today. I think he turned 25 yesterday. So happy birthday to Grayson. And then
Thank you so
today,
much.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. And today is the Kingmaker's birthday. My guy. We turning up a little bit today. Kingmaker's birthday is today. Excited to celebrate with him. You see him dancing on the screen. I love it. And then we also have a very special guest. I'm excited about this young lady. It's very important for this particular topic. My wife, Pamela Merritt, is joining us today. Pamela is a therapist who specializes in gay affirmative therapy as well as religious trauma. I probably stole some of her intro. I'm sorry, but
That's
I
okay.
wanted I wanted everybody to know how important her presence is today and why she's here. Of course, yeah, she's beautiful. Yeah, she's my wife. Sure, but she brings something important to this topic. And if you're watching the podcast, you saw her give you a little strange right there. If you're listening, you didn't see that because you got to go to the Patreon to be able to watch it. So today we're dealing with probably the most divisive topic in the church, and that's God and the gays. God and the gays. This is going to be a good one. We're missing a lot of our team today. Shout out to Greg Deloach, the Bearded Sage, Myron, the Mystic, Karima Akila, Nikki Hardeman, Tiger Gibson. Everybody has stuff going on today, but I feel really good about who we have here with us today. So I'm going to go ahead real quick. This is Holy Smokes. So you know I got my stick. I want to tell you what I'm drinking and what I'm smoking. Of course, we don't encourage overindulgence, but we do encourage balance at Holy Smokes. So today, for my stick, in the words of the great American poet, Sir Mix-a-Lot, I like big butts and I cannot lie. So I got the Fat Bottom Betty right here. And I'm excited because this is one of my favorite sticks. This might be my favorite stick alongside the Andalusian Bull from LFD. Today I'm drinking water, and because it's the Kingmaker's birthday, I got a Cafe Royale. He dancing again. So it's coffee, creamer, agave, and for today's mixer, I'm doing Old Fourth bourbon. So I put a little splash of the Old Fourth bourbon. If you're looking for a review of this, I'm not super excited about the Old Fourth. I bought it because I wanted to support an Atlanta company. That's where I live. It's cool, but I usually don't mix my best bourbons. I usually drink my best bourbon straight. So Old Fourth for me is great for mixing. But I sip other bourbons that I'll introduce in other episodes. So I want to allow the other people to go ahead and introduce themselves. I'm going to be biased. I'm going to let my wife Pamela go first, then Grayson, then the Kingmaker, and we're going to jump into this episode.
Okay, well, I was partially introduced. My name is Pamela Merritt, and I am Christian Smith's wife. He introduced me as the therapist. I am the resident therapist for the faith community. I practice emotional wholeness, gay affirmative therapy, and religious trauma therapy. The last two kind of go hand in hand or overlap or intersect, however you like to word that. But I am extremely happy to be here. I've been at a few Holy Smokes in-person gatherings, and they are amazing. I don't have a cigar. I'm not a cigar smoker. I enjoy the way they smell, but I'm not a cigar smoker. But I have some warm French vanilla coffee here. It does not have anything in it because I do have clients that I have to see shortly. And I want to have all of my faculties, as my daddy would say. So I'm drinking this warm coffee that's warming up my body, getting me alert for this great topic and this great conversation. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, when she says she likes the smell of cigars, she really means that. Like when I first started smoking cigars, I thought, after I get done smoking out at the cigar lounge, I got to come home and change and shower and do all of this stuff. I would come home and she would like just get all up under me. Oh my God, you smell so good. Oh, she really legit loves the smell of cigars. Grayson.
Well, first I'm gonna have to say ixnay on that hetero bullshit in this conversation. I'm gonna say no.
You're gonna get it all.
Stop shoving it down my throat. I get it. You're straight. As has been said, my name is I bear many names here at the faith community, but today I am the birthday boy of yesterday, Grayson Hester, Sparkle, Grayson Leviticus, the pundit, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I'm coming at you from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, where I'm celebrating my birthday weekend in the widest and most quarantined fashion, which is being in a cabin in the woods. So happy to be here with y'all. That's also why the lighting is pretty sporadic. But I am drinking. And I turned 25, by the way, as Christian said. So you were correct about that. So I'm drinking water, and I'm drinking Night Owl coffee from the Corner Cup in Tucker, Georgia. I typically live in Atlanta, but I'm quarantining in Tennessee. So whenever I'm in Atlanta, Corner Cup's my spot. I love it. And I'm also drinking a beer that one of the friends here brought, called Pinwheel from Urban Artifact. It's an orange ghost, which means it is a very nice, like, breakfast beer, very fruity, just like the one who's drinking it. So happy to be here.
It's the first time in my life I've ever heard of breakfast beer. Like I've never heard anybody say that before.
I don't know if it's actually a thing, so don't it's just a beer I'm drinking at breakfast and it works for me. So
all right, cool. Kingmaker, birthday boy, what up?
Hey.
Yo, what's going on? Greetings and salutations. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Hello, hey, how you doing? I am Curvaeus Ross, the birthday boy, the Kingmaker. I'm excited to be here. I'm not having the Cafe Royale, so I have a Rocky Patel Royale. Is what I'm smoking today. My first stick of the day, and I am tapping into my Scotch / whiskey self. So I have a Scotch whiskey blend called Johnny Walker Black.
All right.
I'm enjoying that today. So excited to be with you.
Thank you, brother. It's always good to have the Kingmaker with us. We missed him last week, so we're glad that he's back for this episode. So this conversation is so important. It's so important, and I want to preface it real quick before we get into it. We have one rule at Holy Smokes. We talk about it all the time, and that one rule is that we respect each other's lived experience. It really is important when we have conversations about the LGBTQ plus community, because in my church experience, that seems to be the community whose lived experience we reject the most, like, and alongside women. I think we reject the lived experiences of LGBTQ plus people and women in my church tradition more than anything. So, we have different doctrines and theologies. And the challenge here is when somebody's lived experience contradicts your doctrine or theology, you take that opportunity to learn from what they lived. Also, we still got the dollar jar. We're keeping track. Our producer Kirkland is on with us. He is keeping track of the dollars. When somebody uses a word, it's going in the chat. We're going to bring it up and we're tracking these dollars. I'm telling you, by the time we can meet together again in person, like, we're going to have a nice little fund that we can use to buy something major with all of these big words y'all use. So another piece, we're talking about this issue of, you know, inclusion, affirmation, homophobia, so on and so forth. This is just a primer on the topic. We could talk about issues about the LGBTQ plus community every week and have something new to talk about. So we're not going to cover everything. This is not exhaustive. At the same time, what I want to say before we get into the discussion is we at the faith community use a term called Q plus, and I'll tell you why. LGBTQIA, LGBTQIA plus, that's really long. It's a lot to say every single time. And some people use the term queer, and I was using that for a while. But I met a gay man who was like in his mid to late 40s probably, who did this seminar. And he said he cannot reclaim the word queer because of how damaging it was to him in his childhood. He said he understands how other gay people or other queer people can use that term because that's not a new phenomenon. Plenty of people reclaim words that were meant for evil and they convert them into terms of endearment. Like in the black community, some people say nigga all the time. Some black people hate the term nigga. And, you know, different people have their different takes. So in honor of this gay brother that I spoke with who said he cannot reclaim that term, instead of using the term queer as a blanket, we say Q plus, because Q plus means you could be queer or you could be questioning and everything in addition to that. So when we say Q plus, we're talking about the LGBTQIA community. If you don't know what that means, it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, asexual, plus. Oh yeah, I missed. Yeah, all of that stuff. Anyway, here's what we're gonna do today. This is just a primer on the topic, but let's deal with it as we're still establishing the identity of Holy Smoke, Cigars, and spirituality. So my question today is really straightforward. Why should the church adjust how it handles the Q plus community? I'm not even going to say should the church adjust because that's not even a debate. And we're not even debating should the church adjust. We're going to ask why should the church adjust the way it handles the Q plus community? And then we're going to piggyback on that and say how should the church adjust how it handles the Q plus community? And because Pamela is a church girl herself, she's also a gay affirmative therapist and she specializes in religious trauma. Pamela, I want you to answer that question first. Why should the church adjust how it handles the Q plus community?
Woo! Why should the church? I'm gonna try to answer them both at the same time. Why should the church readjust or reevaluate, for me is a better word, how they have treated the Q plus community? And you said, how should they go about
Right.
the reframing? Okay. So the reason why they should is because of the damage and trauma and abuse that they have caused, whether it was covert or overt. The church, and I can stand on this like 10 toes to the ground, has abused and damaged so many people out of that stance of rejection. And when I was thinking about the topic for today, you know, because I'm a therapist, I've done community-based mental health, which means I've been out in the community. I did that for like 12 years, in and out of people's houses, in and out of jails, in and out of schools, that type of stuff, doing therapy. And the church, the way the church has handled the Q plus community reminds me of foster parents that I used to work with that were not good foster parents, and they had really bad motives when it came to the foster kids. It was like, I'm gonna have you here because there's a check attached to you. And
Ooh.
can get a lot of you here, then there's a lot of benefit that I can get out of having you all in my house. So I think about that with the way the church has handled the Q plus community. It's like it's like you are only seen if you have a gift that we can use. If you don't have a gift that we can use, you can get in, but you're still going to be invisible while you're here. So we will talk about you like you're not here. We will do things that covertly traumatize you like you aren't here. It's the same thing as a bad foster parent. And we have to reevaluate how we have handled the Q plus community, because first of all, it's not godly. That's first of all. It's not godly at all. It's abusive. It's an abusive relationship. And the way that the church has to do that is that the church has to look internally. They have to reflect. They have to acknowledge the fact that they have mishandled people and mishandled people's family. They have to not only acknowledge it, but they have to take accountability for it. And then they're going to have to back up a little bit and work through the history of why we believe the way we do when it comes to same gender loving couples or the Q plus community on a spectrum as a whole. Like, we need to figure out how we got here. We got to take a look back at our past, at these scriptures that we've taken out of context, and we have to acknowledge that we use them for our benefit to hurt and ostracize other people. That's how we get on the path to what do we do now. We can't figure out how we need to move forward with people until we go back and look at why we've treated them like we've treated them this way to begin with. And I
I
don't
got a
want to talk
question.
all the time, but yeah, it's like it's really bad foster parenting. It's like you have these people in your care that you're supposed to care for and nurture, and because they don't fit your schema, you only use them for their benefit. So we will only use gay people if they can cook, if they can sing, if they can direct a choir. So whatever your gift is, we will acknowledge you and shine the light on you in that moment. And when that moment is over, you go back to being invisible. Okay, that's it. I'm done.
Question. Wait a minute. I need you, you know, because you're here and I know you have an appointment after this, so you might not be able to stay for the whole episode.
Okay.
I need for you to clarify a little bit when you say trauma. How has the church, in your expert opinion, caused trauma to the Q plus community? Help us
Um,
understand that term trauma and how you're using it.
sure. And it's hard for me to shine a light on that topic and not group everybody together. So what I'll do is I'll talk about trauma in general coming from the church. And when I say trauma, I mean impactful events that affect people in a negative way and stay with them. And most of the time when there's trauma involved, which could be covert or overt, which means covert is undercover stuff like leaving people out, not creating space for people, not allowing people to be heard and their feelings to be heard, asking people to leave their humanity at the door because God is displeased with that part of them. That is covert abuse, because what it does is it sends a message to that person that something is wrong with them. And when people internalize that they are flawed, they behave in a certain type of way because they start to believe that, especially when we're talking about authority like the church and authority like your preacher or your spiritual leader. We take that word to heart because they're the center of our community. So when I'm talking about traumatic events, I'm talking about covert abuse, like things that we say messages that are caught and not taught. So leaving people out of things, not making space for people, putting out messages that other people attach themselves to. And so now they act a certain way towards the person that's abusive. And abuse causes trauma. And then you
Overt.
have overt abuse, which is messages from the pulpit that are harmful to people's psyche. So you say that a group of people like the Q plus community is gonna go to hell for something that is natural for them. You tell them they are gonna go to hell for the way God created them, because you don't even believe in the humanity that God gave them. You because you don't agree with it or you don't understand it, you demonize it, you put that message out to your congregation, and then your congregation as a whole internalizes it. Even the gay person internalizes that. That is abusive. And they live that out because they take that as the truth. And
Yeah,
so
it's like
what I have to
internalized
do,
homophobia.
right,
Yeah,
internalized homophobia. And so what I have to do is sit with clients. And like I said in the beginning, there's an intersection of that religious trauma and that gay affirmative therapy, because in between trying to help someone understand who they are in their sexual identity or their gender identity, um, I also have to unpack a lot of times the messages that came from church, the place that was supposed to take care of them. So it's like I'm doing both at the same time. They go hand in hand, because trying to help them be whole in their gayness, or however they're living their life out as a Q plus person, I also have to help them reconcile their relationship with God and figure out what that looks like.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, that's a lot. I want to
I
let
hope that was clear. I'm
either
sorry. I
Kurt
hope
Vance
that was
or Grayson. Yeah, oh yeah, that was clear. It's just heavy. It was clear and heavy. Um, well, everybody knows Grayson is the pundit. He's also the representation of the Q plus community on the cast. And I just want to make a point. Grayson is not on the cast because he's gay. He's on the cast because he's brilliant. He's on the
No,
cast
thank you.
because he offers valuable insight. And we didn't ask him to be a part of this cast as a token. He was already a faithful member of Holy Smokes before we ever started a podcast. So I want you to jump in, Grayson. This is your lived
Mm.
experience. Tell us your thoughts, man.
Well, first, thank you for that introduction. Pam, everything you said on point. I hadn't really heard the foster home or the foster parents image before, and
That
that
was good.
rings really true, especially the checks part. That was a throw a shoe moment. Um, yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to to condense all of the thoughts I might have about this. And as you noted before, like this could be an entire season of Holy Smokes, not even talking about like trans people or bisexual people, just like even just gay men, the cisgender meaning corresponding with your sex corresponding with the gender, the sex you were assigned at birth corresponding with the gender as which you now identify. Cisgender
I
white
mean,
gay men.
this could be a whole podcast if you wanted it to be.
Right,
You could make a whole podcast dedicated to this topic if you really
exactly.
wanted to.
So I'm gonna go ahead and say the fact that this is what I'm most interested in and passionate about, and the fact that it is my lived experience as a cisgender gay man, means I'm gonna struggle talking about this one, just because
Right.
there's so many things I could say. Um, yeah, Pam really hit it on the head that it's just like it's not it's you could talk about a lot of external reasons, like because you know we need to expand our horizons, or we need to be more loving, or we need to acknowledge the work that Q plus people have been doing within and for the church forever. It's like, if you have seen an organist play, you have seen a Q plus person perform. Like, if somebody tells me like, oh yeah, John down at the Presbyterian church is an organist, I'm like, okay, I'll see him on Grinder later.
So I want to jump in right there, right? Because there's a cultural divide right there.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
we've talked about that before.
yeah.
In predominantly white churches, the organist is gay. In black churches, the musicians are usually straight, and the choir director or the worship leader or the choir members are gay, generally
Right,
speaking. So that's the
right.
cultural divide, but still, it's the same, regardless. But go ahead.
Right. Yeah, that's very good to point out. And another cultural divide, Grinder is an app predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly used by gay or white Q plus people, and Jacked is what black and Q plus people of color tend to use. So there's so many different cultural divides, which also speaks to how complicated this issue is. Because, as a white gay man, I have a lived experience that is still it's intention of like marginalization and privilege. And then I have many black Q plus friends um, who still feel oppressed by people who look like me and love like me. So yeah, there's so many different cultural divides, but I think what can unify it all is not is beyond any external reason, which are valid, but it's essentially saying that we as straight people, y'all corner the market on what love can be and what love is, and you have
Mm,
the authority to define the boundaries of God's love. It's
mm,
like saying like God is God is only capable of being represented in two people, emphasis on two, because we could talk about polyamory too. We're not gonna, but we could.
it's
Two
biblical.
people, yeah, biblical. It is. Solomon had quite a few. You know, it's essentially saying that God's love is limited by a penis and a vagina, and that is enough. And we have the power within our own genitalia to box in God, and that we need that to be the case. Because I think it's just really, and again, I can go on and on, but it's really interesting to me that in a manner similar to how like critical race theorists talk about people needing to be white or choosing to be white, where like whiteness isn't anything that was naturally given to me, it was bestowed upon me by people who needed the world to be a certain way. And so I feel that the same way with straightness. It's like white has positive connotations, purity, innocence, yada yada, um, as opposed to black, which tends to have like dirty, evil, like it's intentionally set up that way, right? So like straight, people choose to be straight. People choose to lean into this status that was bestowed upon them by people in the 1800s who needed the world to be a certain way. And it's just, and that goes entirely counter to the way God created the world, right? So I'm, like I said, I'm in the Smokies. I'm in the national park, oldest mountains in the world, my favorite place on earth. And there is nothing more unnatural than straightness, right? And I'm going to show you. So we have here the deck, right? Straight. It was built this way to contain something and more so to keep something out. There are no straight lines in nature. It is naturally impossible for there to be straight lines. And you can see that by how curved everything is, by how like flamboyant everything is, how one might say queer everything is. So if you require people to be straight, and if you require the world to be straight, you require your domain to be God's creation, and you require God to fit into your unnatural definitions. And
Oh my.
in order for the church to be queer, and I'm going to use that word in a more broad sense, but I'm going to use Q plus when referring to the community to be respectful to Holy Smokes. If you require God to do that, then you are making an artificial, you're basically 3D printing God and telling us that's all the divine can be. And if you really want to get in touch with the divine within yourself and within the world and within other people, and to actually love like Jesus, then you're going to have to recognize that the world is a bit less straight than you would want it to be.
Yeah, real
So
quick,
again,
real quick.
yeah,
Because I want to hear what Kingmaker has to say, but I know Pamela has to go see a client. So,
yeah.
Pamela, in 2 minutes, give us whatever thoughts you have. We got to bring you back for another episode because clearly you have more to say.
Absolutely.
So I want Pamela to say something, and then we're gonna kick it over to the Kingmaker because we want to hear what he has to say too.
Um, I agree with Grayson. I think the requirements, I think it is harmful um, for us to require people to love a certain way when the way that they love doesn't harm anybody. It may make people uncomfortable, and that is something that those individuals need to reconcile themselves,
Mm,
because it's not people who aren't straight. It's not their job to make everybody else comfortable. It's like me in my straight heterosexual relationship. It's not my job to make sure that people outside of my relationship are comfortable with me. It's not the Q plus person's job to make sure that I'm comfortable with the way that they love when they're not hurting anybody. They're not harming anybody. That's a personal issue that I need to be reflective about, that I need to find out what that is in me that makes me feel that way about people in healthy relationships. And I think the church has to do the same thing and be honest. I think the biggest issue with the church when it comes to the way the church has treated the Q plus community is that they are scared to tell the truth about what they have done, because then you have to take accountability for all of the people that you may have seriously damaged. If you
mm,
tell the truth and say, oops, we messed this up, then you have to take accountability for all of the bodies you mishandled, all of the spirits you mishandled, all of the souls you mishandled, all of the people that trusted in the community, in the faith community, all of the people that trusted in their pastor, all of the people that trusted in the congregants. you know you have to take account The church has to take accountability for that, and I think they are afraid because a lot of churches and religious spaces have built themselves on certainty. So to go back and say, oh, we did that wrong, is scary. It's scary because what does admitting that you were wrong as the spiritual authority, what does that mean? What does that mean for your church? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for your reputation? If you say this huge thing that we have made huge, we messed it up. We messed it up. I think they're just afraid. But
mm.
yes, I do have to go because I have a client in a few minutes. And please bring me back. This is awesome. I love this topic. I love this community. I love talking about church stuff, even though I have my own other opinions. Happy birthday to my friend TK, the Kingmaker, once again. Hey. And happy birthday yesterday for Grayson. And I will definitely check y'all out at another time. Everybody that's watching, enjoy it because it's going to be awesome. I'll see y'all later.
Thank you, darling. Kingmaker, come on, man, talk to us.
I think the big challenge here is parallel to America, simply because if America had to go back and be honest about Vietnam, we
Mm,
would have to verbalize that we killed innocent people to make ourselves feel good about our issues. And oftentimes, the people that we as a country want to help lord over and spiritual lies operate in third world countries. And the only time it is serious to us is what happens in a third world country peers its face in the context of our boundary line. Within that, the church has operated as a vicious Vietnam on homosexuality. And we see many of the people in the Q plus community as living in a third world country that God has sent us as straight Christians to deliver food, resources, and commercials to make us look well.
And
And
exploit.
and I think the problem with it is it would force us to apologize, to reevaluate, and to adjust our perspective of a God that many of us don't know. Simply because society argues on the history of when the word homosexuality comes into our vocabulary, whether it's the 17th or the 19th century. What nobody argues is for it to come into our dialect at that time, for it to be in the Bible means somebody had to go back and add it after the Bible was written. The second thing that happens is it would force us to recapitulate our perspectives of how we see Christ.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Come on, man. Recapitulate? You do this every episode.
The Kingmaker is you ain't the Kingmaker anymore. You're the Dollar General.
The Dollar General, yes. Grayson with the fun. Grayson, that's the best fun you've ever said since I've known you. You are now the Dollar General. yes.
Take down the graphics, change the website, get into litigation.
Everything. The Dollar General.
I'm starting to think the only reason that you all brought me on this Holy Smokes group is because I'm black. And you use this moment to insult me. I don't like it. Nah, this is frustrating. I'll give you $1 for that. That's fine.
You ain't got no choice now.
When we look at a passage like Romans, I think it's Romans 1, which we use to state that God gave them over, and then gave them up. We miss the succession of the passage. As you know, from a theological standpoint, if you want to understand one verse, you go back up to the previous verse and you keep going up. And what the consistent theme of that Romans passage is because they would not honor him, is what continues to be the refrain over and over again, which implies that if they had honored him, none of these components would even be an issue. What we have highlighted, though, is that there are contexts that we could read in to abominate and to degrade homosexuals when that was not the focus. The focus was giving God the glory, and it stays throughout the passage of Romans. When you also have this conversation in the New Testament about being able to create sodomy as a way to tie this into the homosexual community, you have to understand that you don't have to be homosexual to have a sodomy encounter. You can be straight to do that. If you go back to the old, if you go back to the Old Testament, we like to read Sodom and Gomorrah into this. And I think it is the book of Ezekiel
Yeah.
that helps us to understand that the sin of Sodom was not homosexuality. The sin of Sodom was how they gave horrible customer service to humanity.
Yep.
And then if you just look at the homosexual dynamic when you're dealing with laws with children of Israel, the real challenge was that they never talk about what this does to females. It always speaks of how it looks at males from a humanity standpoint, and the undertone of that passage or those passages are about making sure that the promise of God to Abraham does not get deleted. Because if you keep spilling your seed or not repopulating, then Abraham cannot be the father of many nations. But this is not degradation. We would then have to go back and reanalyze everything that we say about God, simply because if you feel that being gay is a sin, then I would have to use that homonym or that synonym as a parallel, that if gay is sin or abomination, then what is your gay? What is it that is too gay for God in your life? What do you do that makes God hate you? And when you look at the book of Proverbs, he states 6 things that God hates, and the 7th is an abomination. That 7th is people who sow discord in their family. So if we had to look at what we've done to condemn homosexuals, the Q plus community, we would then have to go back and hold a mirror to ourselves and then realize that God hates at least one person in all of our families. With that being the case, it forces us to never want to drop resources on the gay community, because it will force the gay community to have Vietnam on the rest of us. And when that happens, it puts us in a position where we don't want to reconcile. We just want to blame particular leaders, blame particular perspectives, and minimize God's power to the fact that He can make a one-eyed baby. He can make a one-leg baby. He can make a baby with a half a kidney, and that could be God. But He cannot make a impactful, contributing human who has a sexual preference that I don't agree with. God is not smart enough to do that, but He's divine enough to be one who mutates infants, and we give Him the glory for it. It's too much that we would have to reconcile. And if we don't start now, it's going to minimize God's power to places that we can't and are uncomfortable going and minister to.
So
Yeah.
that's an excellent point. Real quick, I'll let you slide because I wanted you to finish your thought. But Kirkland did mention you have another dollar for saying
Wait a minute.
homonym.
Homonym.
Homonym, we've used that. No. We used that in the first episode. That's already been defined.
I don't remember using homonym. I've been on every
went through
episode.
exegesis. You all got me for exegesis. You got me for hermeneutics. And then I used the term when we were talking about homiletics. I used homonyms. We talked about homilies. We use that. You are not about to just keep taking dollars from me for no reason at all. And Kirkland, I need Kirkland to stay behind the camera. I need I'm tired of this. I'm tired of this abuse. You all are using your leverage against me to just take my dollars. And this ain't a strip club. I'm not giving them out.
That's why we got you on the show, because we knew we can get all your money. We were trying to rape your pockets. We hate when you're not here because the offering goes down that week.
I'm getting ready to text my offer right now to the faith community. This gonna stop right now.
Hold on. Grayson, you gonna say something, man?
Yeah. So a more serious note about language, and I say this not to be petty, just out of a deeper knowledge of how certain Q plus people respond to language, is that homosexual, when used as like a blanket term, can be felt by some as, it would be analogous to like if a white person were to say colored people, where it's like it's not super offensive. Analogous, yep, you're right. So like, yeah, that's $1. Um,
Yep.
uh, it's like analogy. It is to this as to that. So analogous is the adjective form of analogy, but it is $1 word. I ain't gonna be like Curvance. I'm gonna admit it. I'm gonna accept it. Call me the dollar corporal. I don't have the clout or the power to dispute these rules. Um, but just a quick note, especially for people listening, that homosexual can be heard as a hurtful term. I know you don't mean it that way, but it's just been used so viciously in the past, and so like clinically in the past, that it can sometimes be received that way, even if there's no ill intent behind it. So I
And
just wanted
that
to
just,
offer that quick note about language.
and that just goes to show how much this topic evolves, right?
Right,
Because
absolutely.
at one point, to use the term homosexual was acceptable. Like that was the
Hmm.
respectable thing to say. But as it continues to evolve, things shift, and we have to be mindful of like how that plays out. And for me, with Black people, it's like we understand it when it comes to us, right? Because we have a history where at one point colored was our term.
Right.
And now in 2020, if a white person says color, we're looking at you like, what the hell did you just say? Are you serious?
And I've
Like,
heard
but
white people still use it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's like, but yeah, it continues to shift and evolve because of our, ooh, I almost said a word. Our our desperate need for categories. Like we
Right.
have to have a label for people because if we can't, when we label you, it helps us to kind of like put you in this box, and I need this box to put you in. So I have to have a word I can use.
Hmm.
Where if we would just let people be people and stop worrying about all of these different labels and categories, I think everybody will be able to live their lives in peace. But
Yeah.
I cut you off, Grayson. What else are
No,
you gonna say?
no, you're good, and that's very correct. And Curvance, I want to piggyback on that and say I loved what you said about Vietnam. That's a really powerful metaphor, and I hadn't thought about it that way before. And I think you're right, in maybe more ways than you even know, given the way that um, in reconciling with our past as a country, with the past as it relates to straight people, the church, the Western world. Like it's all part of the same package. Like when you order oppression from Amazon Prime, you open it up and homophobia, sexism, transphobia, racism, colonialism, it's all in the same white supremacy package. And not accidentally Jeff Bezos sent it to you. Um, because like the thinking about third world, beyond being a great metaphor, which it is, um, you know, to categorize people, as Christian said, um, in those very binary, which means either or, but like it's either this or it's that, in those ways, was a way that European settlers uh, justified the exploitation of 80% of the world, including Vietnam, not exclusively, but including Vietnam, where, you know, using these man-made categories of sexuality was just another way that European colonizers could arrive in African tribes who might celebrate and did celebrate gender queer, neither male nor female, um, both people who were naked, people who were savages. Like all these categories were used to make third world countries. right?
For those
So
who are listening and not watching, Grayson did air quotes when he said savages. Just want to be clear.
yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
We're not gonna do nothing about binary.
He explained it though.
So now we're changing the rules because the white guy is on here explaining it all, and then because he's cisgender, and because this is the topic, you're gonna just keep giving him leverage. Is that what you're doing?
No, when
So
you
if I had
use a
said
word, you
what
got
I
to define
said,
it.
this
If
Listen,
you
is white privilege at its finest, man. It's all this is.
I
I'm
think you're
sick
just
of it.
trying to. I think you're trying to deflect your straight discomfort right now.
no, here's the rule. Here's the rule. If you use a word that would be a dollar jar word and you immediately define it, then that's okay. Like, use the word and tell us what it means. You just be throwing words out there and just keep on going like everybody understands it.
Like
Like,
they got
Dark-skinned
they got me.
agenda, Doc. It's the dark-skinned
dark skinned
agenda, Doc.
agenda.
um, so binary, like everyone knows binary code, right? 0 1 0 1. It's either a 0, it's a 1. You place people in these categories, and as Soren Kierkegaard said, something to the effect of, my headphones just ran out of battery, so I might have to pull in closer. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
good.
Once you label me, you undo me or you uncreate me, and you can exploit it. So that is part of the whole narrative. Like in reconciling with our past, it goes all the way back to where arguably everything comes from, which is colonialism and imperialism and Europeans finding whatever measures they could to justify dehumanizing and therefore enslaving, raping, and abusing and kidnapping third world, air quotes again, third world people. And so you're right on the money. And then with Romans, like the whole context of that passage is really, in addition to what you said, I'm not negating, but contributing. It's about idolatry, right? So like when they turned their backs on God to worship their idols, that's when God, as it says in the text, gave them over to, like permitted them to wreak their own havoc. And if we look at it in terms of idols, straightness is an idol. Heterosexuality is an idol. For people to construct and build a box around the wildness of creation and the extravagant, boundless ways that humans are able to love in order to exploit them means that you're worshiping something that you created, which means that you are swearing fealty to and offering offerings to something that you created in order to fill your own pockets. And that's idolatry. So what Romans could actually be saying is that when we make of straightness or whiteness or maleness the idols that we've made them, systems and ideas that have long since expired their purpose and instead are serving their own ends, as Walter Wink defines idolatry, then God is giving us over to our own destruction. Apparently, you can't hear anything.
No, I got you now. That might have just been me going berserk.
Oh, okay. So God is giving us over to our own disordered desires, one of which is to privilege one sexuality over the other. And so if we keep it in the context of idolatry, we all have to look back at our history, which James Baldwin says white people, black people, and I would expand gay people, straight people, Q plus people, have very good reason not to want to go back to history because it's so painful for various reasons. But to admit that Q plus people are just as beloved by God would mean to admit that the entire Western project is heretical and is sinful, and that Europe may have a lot more to atone for than even racism.
So I wanna say something. You use the term heretical, and of course I go by the heretic. And I know people sometimes. Actually, somebody commented on a flyer that had my picture on it, and it referred to me as the heretic. and they were confused by it. And I use the term heretic in the sense of the definition that states a heretic is someone who holds opinions or views that is contrary to what is widely accepted. So the heresy you're speaking of is harmful. And I want to draw a clear line of distinction because the thoughts that I have been called a heretic for have been in pursuit of justice for people, in pursuit of making people whole. And in my pursuit for justice for the oppressed, people have called me a heretic. So I embrace that. Like, okay, yeah, I hold views that you don't hold and your entire network doesn't hold. So if you need to call me a heretic, I'll be that for you because I don't mind being your bad guy. But I want to say something real quick, and this is where I always get in trouble with the blacks. Blacks always get mad at me when I bring this up because you talked about this whole package of oppression, which is, the white supremacist project, which includes racism and homophobia and sexism and so on and so forth. And when I'm talking to my people, right, because I come from the black church, I grew up National Baptist, right? So late night preaching at National Baptist Convention. That's how I grew up, So I talk to my people a lot about this particular topic. And whenever I draw parallels between the struggle of black people and the struggle of Q plus people, black people go nuts. They want to burn me at the stake and they want to bring up every single difference. Like, you can't compare that. You can't compare that. And I say, wait, hold up a second. First of all, black people don't own oppression. That's number one. Yes, we have been severely oppressed, but we don't own oppression. Number two, yes, there are differences between the oppression of black people and the oppression of gay people. But let's pause for a second and recognize some people have been oppressed in both ways. Let's not forget, Q plus people are black people oftentimes. So we ostracize and isolate and alienate our people who are also Q plus. And then the other thing that I have to bring up here, with all of these differences between the oppression of black people and the oppression of Q plus people, the differences do not negate the similarities. I'm gonna say that again. The differences do not negate the similarities. One more time for the people in the back.
Say it.
The differences do not negate the similarities. Here is the basic core similarity of how black people have been discriminated against and how Q plus people have been discriminated against. We are both oppressed for a characteristic of ourselves over which we have no choice. A black person does not get to choose to be black. A gay person does not choose to be gay. You don't choose your sexuality, you discover it. You discover, oh, this is what I like. And you lean into that discovery. It's not a preference, it's an orientation. So we have to be careful with how we just completely dismiss when Q plus people help to identify the oppression by making that parallel or building that bridge between what black people experience and what Q plus people experience. And one thing I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna let you jump in, Grayson.
Yeah.
Here's one major difference between the oppression of black people and the oppression of Q plus people that actually leans in the favor of Q plus people. In the black community, our oppression has always been from outside of our community. We could always go into our community, into our homes, and find a safe haven because our oppression came from white people on the outside. In the Q plus community, you are oppressed by your own family more times than not. It's the people who raised you. It's the people who baptized you. It's the people who christened you. It's the people who fed you, who then disown you and tell you that you're dead to them. That is a level of diabolical oppression that Black people who are not gay cannot relate to. So go ahead.
Let me say, go ahead, Grayson, go ahead.
One quick thing, because I don't want to dominate, but yeah, you're totally right. Quick thing, my friends and I were sitting in the hot tub last night.
Oh wow! Right off of saying that you didn't want to dominate, then you turned around and said you and your friends were sitting in the hot tub. There's a lot of puns in there that I don't even want to deal with right now.
They're all
go right
straight.
ahead. Go right ahead. Yeah. That complicates the matter even greater, but I love it. Go right ahead.
And there was alcohol involved. Oh God!
Oh my God!
That's happening. Just real quick, like we were talking about, there's a friend of ours who went to college with us, a white, doesn't identify as, but is 99% likely. Actually, yeah, did at one point. Came out, I think his sophomore year of college, and then his grandfather said, if you come home for Thanksgiving, we will shoot you.
Oh God.
Yeah. So that's not uncommon. And so the quick thing I want to say is you're right on the money, totally correct. And if we're going to build coalition, right? If we're going to build community, if we're going to build something that can organize ourselves into a force that can challenge these forces we talk about, white supremacy and all of the subheaders, for anyone to separate, further traumatize, isolate, alienate, all the things you said, anyone in any community, especially communities that are marginalized in other ways, who does that benefit? The people who are already in power. Like, it is a classic tool of the colonizer, and the don't scare me like that, colonizer. It is a colonizer's playbook to divide and conquer. And so the more that people of any other identity further separate their own families in order to feel some breeze of power and privilege that is wafting down from the farts of the powerful. Like, if nothing, as Wanda Sykes said, nothing good ever trickled. So if you're experiencing something that's trickling down on you, it's piss. And that's what the powerful are doing. But people are like opening their mouths to that and thinking it's water, getting a few drops of that power and privilege to make themselves feel better, as they are denigrating and completely dehumanizing people within their own communities. And ultimately that continues to benefit and uphold the people. Denigrate. Yeah.
Integrate. Yeah. Dollar. So if Curvance is the Dollar General, Grayson, we're gonna start calling you the Dollar Tree.
Dollar Tree? Yeah. Wearing green. I love it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
There it is.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Another name for Grayson, the Dollar
Tree. But yeah, ultimately, like, who are we actually helping? And it's certainly not ourselves. And if we want to build community for a kingdom of heaven purpose, for a justice purpose, which might be the same thing, then think about, like, who actually is benefiting from continuing to parse out and separate and dehumanize.
Yeah. Kingmaker, go ahead.
Yeah.
So let me back up a few moments. One of my realities is, when you first brought this concept to me about 8 years ago, I was one of those people, a Christian.
Yeah.
I was one of those people who was extremely offended when you tried to create a parallel between civil rights, oppression, homosexual, cisgender, Q plus dynamics African Americans. But when you explain your angle and your rationale, it opened my perspective. And what I learned quickly is your culture can affect your context, your communication, and your connection.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest challenges with African Americans that is parallel to the church is that we want to connect ourselves to that which condemns us.
Mm.
So we
Wait a minute. Wait. You got to say that again.
Yeah,
You got to
that's
say that again. That was so good. We want to
one of the
connect
challenges
ourselves.
is that we want to connect ourselves to that which condemns us.
Woo!
The challenge that we don't realize is to connect ourselves with oppression means that we never want to disconnect ourselves from it. So to be in that space, you are subliminally saying that I want to own oppression so much that I want to marginalize myself from freedom, and I want to minimize other people who could further my challenge, my obstacle, and my point of view. The second thing that it does in that same moment is for the church to not want to disconnect or own religion, is for us to disconnect from the freedom that Christ gave us. Because Christ is in the moment where he's coming to honestly annihilate religions or sects. And when we are looking at this, for some reason, Christians believe that we are the only religion on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
This is a interesting parallel simply because it forces us as African American Christians to minimize the viewpoint of those who have a parallel context but have a different interaction.
Right.
And this
Right.
now reads a lot into how we operate. I heard a preacher say several years ago, if you really believed that God hated anybody that had a preference when it came down to their sexual partners, then take everybody from that group away from the church, and you quickly realize that you would not be able to have church on Sunday morning.
Nope.
Because you would eliminate most of the songs, you would eliminate most of the liturgy, you would eliminate most of the messages. And I think the main concern here is that we do not define terminology and our understanding of it so that we could communicate, connect, and create context. Many of us believe that we chose to be straight. There has never been a day where I woke up between 0 and 16 and said, I'm going to pick liking boys or liking girls.
Right.
It was innate within me. It was not a decision. It was how I was born. And if that is the case, there has to be some context and credibility to the fact that there are people who do not choose this context. I do believe that there are layers to this, but in the grand scheme of this, to put everybody in the package that says that you didn't get this way by just divine creation minimizes our ability to be free in the things that we did not choose. I didn't choose to be dark skinned. The sun chose this. My
Right.
gene pool chose this. For you to blame me for my color is the same contextual argument for me to blame somebody for their preference. And many of us confuse gender with gender preferences. We confuse sexuality with sexual preference. And many of us have a hard time embracing that because our culture has taught us how to do something. If you look at If we even just look at the biblical context, we would have to now shift this to Europe. And if you've ever been to Europe, perspectives of cultural sexuality are drastically different than Western perceptions of sexuality. Even from a African American context, because of the oppression that we've had, and because of the powers that be trying to make sure that we are manly men, we now can't do certain things in our home, in construct that makes us feel like we can't, we won't be men. If you've ever gone to a locker room in a gym, simply because of white people being free and always operating in freedom, they have no problem walking around with no flip flops on, no towel on. They don't mind walking up to you talking with the genitalia hanging out.
We'll have a whole
That's
conversation.
They'll have a whole conversation with you with just everything hanging out. For a black man, you offended me. You are disrespecting me. We're going to put a towel on. We're going to get dressed before we almost have a conversation with you. You can't be in the stall and look over the urinal and have a conversation if you're black, simply because the unwritten rule is to look straight ahead. Simply because that's our cultural context, and
I
we
will
cannot
say,
allow. Go ahead.
Those white people coming up to you with their balls flopping everywhere, they probably didn't wash their legs either. they coming up to you with that wet dog smell, being like, "Hey, I would have voted for Obama a third time if I could."
Well,
have you heard of this Beyonce character? She's pretty wild.
Yeah, I think that bleeds into it, though, and I think we have to have this conversation for our understanding. And when that doesn't happen, it minimizes our ability to give voice to places that we've muted.
So I want to say something, and then I want each of you, if you have anything else to say, take 2 or 3 minutes to say it, and then I'll wrap us up today. I want to acknowledge the sacrifice of being an ally and being an advocate. The challenge for churches and people of faith reassessing or reevaluating how we handle Q plus people is that if you take that step, you will have to make some sacrifices. And many people who have this desire maybe to be in community relationship with Q plus people, the risk that they run, it's risky. The risk is greater than the reward in their minds because it puts them in a place of having their comfort challenged. And I can attest to that. I had to sacrifice some stuff in order to advocate for my Q plus neighbors. I had to sacrifice some shallow relationships, some people that I thought were like down, gonna ride with me. The minute I started talking about justice for Q plus people, those relationships ceased. I had to sacrifice a booked itinerary. I was doing quite a bit of preaching before I started talking about justice for Q plus people. I had to sacrifice my itinerary. I had to sacrifice some money in my bank account because my itinerary came with honorarium checks. I had to sacrifice some of that stuff. I had to sacrifice pastoring the church with the built-in budget that could pay me a salary because I wanted to seek justice for people that I felt like were being overlooked. So I don't want to just gloss over that because there is a risk in taking this step. You will be chastised. People will talk about you. People will give you the side eye. In my case, people will call you a heretic. But I can say, after going through that and not even like having fully recovered, like my itinerary has not fully recovered. I started a church a couple of years ago and we're still developing and evolving and growing. And my church is not in a position to pay me a salary. Like I'm still going through that process, but I would not go back. I would not go back. The relationships that I've developed, the change that I've seen in people's lives as a result of taking that risk has been worth everything that I've lost. So I want to let Grayson say something in Curvance, and then I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Christian. First of all, thank you. I appreciate that, and for many reasons. A great church community. Some money from the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship for working with the faith community, which is not inconsequential. And just a really beautiful relationship with both of y'all, that to me models and makes somewhat real, provides a preview of what the kingdom of heaven is and will be like. That when we did our photo shoot for Holy Smokes, one of my favorite moments was you, Christian, wearing your heretic hoodie and me being all being all fabulous with my painted nails and the "this is the gay that the Lord has made" shirt, all of that. You pouring me my drink. And that was just like it was staged, but it was authentic. That is our relationship, and that is our relationship, Curvance, where it shows that if we can die to whatever we have called ourselves, whether we've identified more with being straight than being human, or being white than being human, or being male or being human, if we identify more with that identifier than with our common humanity or our common belovedness as children of God, as image bearers, as imago Dei, and we've used that before, so I don't have to define it, but I will anyway. Image bearers, an image of God. That is our common humanity, and this context, immediate context of Holy Smokes, of faith community, shows what happens when I die to my whiteness, when I can set that aside, to use one of Curvance's favorite words, to minimize my to minimize my whiteness so I can maximize my relationship with my signature. We haven't said that yet. With my signature. I don't know. I have to throw it in. But it just shows, and then with y'all laying down, like making the making low the mountains, right? So like if privilege is a mountain and we have to make it low, y'all making low your need to be straight and for the world to be straight shows what it looks like, and it's beautiful. It allows for genuine boundary breaking relationship. Like anything that would make I'm just trying to think of like a classic, like well-known awful racist who's dead. Take your pick.
Bull Connor.
Anything that would make Bull Connor spin in his grave or burn even hotter wherever he is right now is something I want to do. And I feel like he is burning up right now, and I love it. And it makes me feel happy. And I think it makes God feel happy too, to see how God's creation are being human with one another and loving one another and laying down our idols in the service of shalom, which is a Yiddish, I think I may be overstepping, but Yiddish or Hebraic term meaning peace, meaning heaven. And I think we see a foretaste of that even now. And I'm grateful for it. And the last thing I'll say is that, as with any allyship, there will be consequences, or it's not allyship. It's just convenient dipping of your toes into whatever edgy cultural water you have been told before you're not supposed to. So it's like, a white person going to a Kendrick Lamar concert and then still saying the N-word whenever it comes up, or the straight white girl going to the drag show being like, "Oh my God, we're so happy to be here. We love gay people," and then like ruining everything, which I have seen happen. And so allyship means that you have sacrificed something and that you've had a cost. Otherwise, it's not allyship.
Right.
And that is what y'all have done. And as with anything, I have to think about this discomfort that I'm feeling at Thanksgiving when I challenge my white cousin's, of course, white cousin, use of some word or some phrase. The discomfort that I feel is real, but it is a drop in the bucket compared to the oppression and dehumanization and brutalization. Brutal meaning brutalized, meaning that you are experiencing brutal behavior by someone else. The brutalization, that it's nothing compared to. And so just always keeping in mind, like, yes, I felt uncomfortable because I had to say something, but I chose that and I can leave that.
Right.
And it's nothing compared to whatever group. So the side eye that Christian gets for being an ally is real and it hurts, but it's nothing compared to the universal cosmic side eye that homophobic Christianity has convinced Q plus people we're receiving from God every minute of every day. But they're both real and they both need to be honored. And I'm soapboxing again, but yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Kingmaker, Dollar General, what you got, brother?
Yeah, man. I thought about the way I grew up. When I got to college, pledging was a normal dynamic. It was a way of acceptance. What people don't understand about pledging is that it is extremely psychologically oppressive if you're not strong enough to maintain it.
Right.
It can be physically abusive. But the whole concept is really not about the physical abuse. The real role and responsibility of the hazing or pledging process is to force you to deal with people who you would not normally deal with unless you were in this encounter where you all decided that you wanted to join an organization in isolation that you had to develop in relation. And what you end up having to do is to start thinking about each other as you would think about yourselves. So it doesn't matter where they came from. It doesn't matter how much you don't like them, how much you don't agree with them. The ultimate goal is before you can cross, you've got to also see each other as you see yourselves. The challenge is most people don't want to go through what it takes to get your letters. Most people don't want to go through what it takes to get over to the other side. And here's the major challenge. When you become a member, nobody is beating you, forcing you, or requiring you to show up. You now have to do what you had to do to get in with your own internal motivation to maintain being in. And that challenge is what happens in Christianity. Many of us don't realize that we're free moral agents. We don't have to choose Christ because he's already chose us. The reason that we isolate ourselves is because in our willingness, we were forced to deal with and become allies to people who we don't see the same way as we see ourselves. And within that challenge, the bigger issue is we really never have seen ourselves. So when I can't see me, I'll force you to see you in a way that I comfortably cannot see myself. And this moment forces us to really realize that going back to this greatest commandment theology, what makes it easy to love Grayson, what makes it easy to love Christian, what makes it easy to love Kirkland, what makes it easy to love anybody is that I love myself enough that when we
Right.
have differences, I can love you. If I can do that, I am literally stating that I'm exposing the love that God has for me. And
Right.
my biggest
Right.
challenge is that God continually loves me with my issues. Let's just stop right there.
Right.
God never gets up one day and says, today I'm going to chunk a few items of oxygen away from you because I don't agree with some of your decisions. If God doesn't, what makes me do it? So the main reason I believe that we as a church have to do some reconciliation is because as God has reconciled the world to himself, if I am like Christ, how is it possible to hold a title without carrying out the same responsibilities and requirements of the organizational leader as he does for me if I'm not willing to do it for others? So I've decided to reconcile the world to myself. Doesn't matter what your preference is. If I allowed a label to let you see all of my issues, you wouldn't sit next to me in church. You wouldn't want to hear me preach, not one time. You wouldn't want to deal with me. Understanding that most of the people have a hard time listening to us because the issue that they think we have is we're alcoholics. We are consuming toxic cigars into our temple. And yet they allow what they are uncomfortable with to allow them to miss the message. If this doesn't happen, we would then have to now make everything in our lives marginalized while God is attempting to maximize us. So I think we got to just change how we see it, whether we like it or not, simply because if you love humanity, you love every component, pro and con, about humanity.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I want to thank both of you guys for your input, and Pamela as well for the input that she gave to us. I also want to say, if you've noticed my shirt and you're interested in having one, go to thefaithcommunity.org/store, and you can find a shirt, a tank top, a hoodie with this same message on it. I wear
a pillow.
Yeah, all that, an apron, whatever. Go check out thefaithcommunity.org/store, and you can get your ally gear as well, among other things. You can also find Holy Smokes apparel at that same link. But I want to address something that I know people are concerned about in the church. And Kervance, you already brought it up, and Grayson, you hit on it as well about how do we reconcile our desire or even the inclination to be allies in what we believe about the Bible. I want to tell you my story. I got married when I was 23, my first marriage. I got married the first time at 23. I was young, in love, insecure, um, and it made sense to get married because based on my upbringing, that was my avenue to have guilt-free sex as much as I wanted to. So I got married at 23. It ended tragically. It was not a good look. And I'm not going to go into the details of why my first marriage ended, but it did not end well. And I initiated the divorce with my first wife. But my first wife did not cheat on me. So I initiated a divorce. If we look at what the Bible says about divorce, like the Bible says that God hates divorce. Jesus even talks about divorce in the Gospels in Matthew, I think chapter 19. Also, I believe in Mark chapter 10, Jesus talks a little bit about divorce, and Jesus says that it's wrong to get a divorce. And Jesus says clearly, if we're gonna go off the literal reading of Scripture, the words of Jesus, Jesus says, if a man divorces his wife for any reason other than infidelity, he commits adultery. And when he remarries, he commits adultery. The same thing for the woman. So if you take a literal reading of what Jesus said, that if I divorce my wife and it's not due to infidelity and I remarry, I am committing adultery. So based on that reading of the scripture, my marriage to Pamela is an act of adultery. Every time I have sex with my wife, I am committing adultery according to a literal reading of what Jesus said. Yet, when I got divorced from my first wife, all of my spiritual friends, advisors, pastors that I looked up to were so happy for me. Like, they were telling me congratulations because they knew I was in an unhealthy situation, but it wasn't due to infidelity, according to what Jesus said. So no one had any condemnation for me. And still, no one condemns me for my marriage to Pamela, even though, according to Jesus, that is an act of adultery. So if you're not going to condemn me, the adulterer, according to Jesus, if you're not going to condemn me for my marriage to Pamela, I'm asking you, extend the same grace to the Q plus individual that you have extended to me. And if you're not going to extend that grace to the Q plus individual, then send me to hell with them, because we're all going together. Okay? Because Jesus made it very clear. But the reason you don't condemn me to hell is because you have evolved on the topic of divorce. You don't see divorce the same way that many people in the scripture saw divorce. So if we as a people can evolve in our understanding of divorce, where now we can say, hey, if you're in a toxic situation, if you're in a situation of domestic abuse, if you're in a situation where you're being abused physically, emotionally, verbally, you need to remove yourself from that situation, whether infidelity is an aspect of it or not. If we can evolve there, if we can evolve on the issue of women, if we can evolve on, if the people in the scriptures can evolve in the area or the topic of dietary restrictions, if the people in the Bible can evolve, I'm talking about within the scriptures, can evolve on the topic of circumcision, why can we not evolve in our understanding of human sexuality? So extend to our Q plus neighbors the same grace you extend to me as a divorced individual. And that's all I'm going to say. Extend the same grace. Extend the same grace. Evolve and extend the grace. Thank y'all so much. This has been an incredible episode. I'm looking forward to the next time. We hope to see you right here on Holy Smoke, Cigars, and Spirituality. Please, if you're listening on Apple, leave us a review, leave a comment. If you're watching on Patreon, leave a comment, share it, tell somebody about it, and we'll see you next time right here. Holy Smoke, Cigars, and Spirituality. We're out.
Hey family, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Now here's what I need you to do. Share this with somebody that you love, whether it be your parents, your siblings, your spouse, your friends at work, your pastor. Share it with somebody. Spread this goodness as far as you possibly can. And then also, thank you again for supporting us on Patreon. We're going to continue to bring you as much content as we possibly can. So, if you have any ideas for topics that you would like for us to cover in future episodes, please send those to us. You can message us on Patreon. You can also hit up our DMs on Instagram. That's at Holy Smokes Movement. Or you can shoot us an email at holysmokes@thefaithcommunity.org. Thanks again, and we hope to see you next time right here on Holy Smokes, Cigars, and Spirituality.